The morning of August 6, 1945, began like any other summer day in Hiroshima. The sun rose over the 7 rivers that carved through the Delta City, casting golden light across wooden homes and stone bridges. Children prepared for school. Mothers hung laundry in small gardens. Streetcars rattled along their tracks, carrying workers to factories that hummed with wartime production. In the harbor, fishermen mended their nets, their boats bobbing gently in the Seto Inland Sea. The air smelled of salt and cooking rice. It was warm already, the kind of heat that promised a sweltering afternoon. No one knew that in less than 3 hours, their world would end in a flash brighter than 1,000 suns. Hiroshima in 1945 was a city of contradictions. Built on a delta where the outer river split into 7 channels before meeting the sea, it had been a castle town for centuries, its foundations laid in 1589 by the feudal lord Mori Teramoto. The black and white Hiroshima castle stood at its heart, a symbol of samurai power and ancient tradition. But by the 20th century, Hiroshima had transformed into something else entirely, a military city, home to the headquarters of the 5th Division and a major supply depot for the Imperial Japanese Army. Its factories produced weapons and ammunition. Its port shipped soldiers and supplies across the Pacific. 350,000 people called this place home, living in wooden houses that pressed close together along narrow streets, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of war. Yet despite its military importance, Hiroshima retained an almost pastoral quality. Unlike Tokyo or Osaka, it had escaped the massive firebombing campaigns that turned other Japanese cities into seas of flame. American B-29 bombers had struck smaller targets around the prefecture, but the city itself remained largely untouched. Some residents whispered that the Americans were saving Hiroshima for something special. Others believed the city's 7 rivers made it difficult to firebomb effectively. Many simply felt grateful. While refugees poured in from devastated cities to the north and south, Hiroshima's residents went about their lives with a strange mixture of wartime tension and everyday normalcy. In the weeks leading up to that August morning, life had taken on an increasingly desperate quality. Food was scarce. Rations had been cut again and again. Women and elderly men now did the work that soldiers once performed. Students as young as 12 worked in factories, assembling weapons and parts for aircraft. The government had mobilized everyone, even first graders participated in air raid drills. Yet there was still laughter in the streets, still festivals at small neighborhood shrines, still the sound of children playing tag in the evening twilight. The human spirit is remarkably resilient, capable of finding joy even in the shadow of apocalypse. The military headquarters at Hiroshima Castle coordinated defense operations across western Japan. Officers in pressed uniforms moved through rooms filled with maps and charts, planning strategies for the invasion they knew was coming. The war was going madly. Everyone understood this, though few spoke it aloud. American forces had taken Okinawa after a brutal 3-month battle. The Philippines had fallen. The home islands now stood exposed, vulnerable. Whispers of surrender circulated in private conversations, but publicly, the message remained absolute. Fight to the death for the emperor. Victory or annihilation. There was no middle ground. On the morning of August 6th, air raid sirens wailed at 7:09 a.m. A single B-29 weather reconnaissance plane had been spotted. People hurried to shelters, then emerged when the all-clear sounded 20 minutes later. It was a false alarm, they thought. Just another weather plane. The Americans sent them over regularly. By 8 a.m., most people had returned to their daily routines. Workers were at their posts. Students attended morning assemblies. Housewives prepared breakfast or headed to market. The city breathed and moved and lived its 350,000 hearts, beating in synchronized rhythm, unaware that a bomb with the explosive power of 15,000 tons of TNT was already falling through the sky above them. The Enola Gay, a specially modified B-29 Superfortress, had taken off from Tinian Island at 2:45 that morning. Its crew of 12 men knew their mission, though they didn't fully understand what they were carrying. It contained 64 kilograms of uranium-235, enriched through a massive industrial effort that had cost $2 billion and employed more than 100,000 people across the United States. The Manhattan Project had taken 3 years and represented the largest scientific undertaking in human history. Now, all that effort, all that genius and labor and secret work had come down to this single moment, a bomb bay opening 31,000 feet above a sleeping city. At 8:15 and 17 seconds, Little Boy detonated. The uranium inside the bomb achieved critical mass. Atoms split, energy released. For a fraction of a second, the temperature at the hypocenter reached several million degrees Celsius hotter than the surface of the sun. A sphere of plasma expanded outward at a significant fraction of the speed of light. Everything within a kilometer radius simply ceased to exist. Buildings, bridges, trees, animals, people all vaporized instantly, leaving only shadows burned into stone and concrete where bodies had blocked the thermal radiation for the briefest instant. The flash came first. People who were looking in the direction of the blast had their retinas burned from their eyes. Others saw the entire world turn white, as if reality itself had been bleached away. Then came the heat wave. Roof tiles melted. Wood burst into flame. Human skin charred and peeled away from bone. People caught in the open were transformed into walking corpses in seconds, their clothes burned off, their skin hanging in strips. Those further from the center saw their friends and neighbors transformed into blackened figures stumbling through smoke, arms outstretched, mouths open in silent screams. The blast wave followed a second later. Moving faster than sound, it swept through the city like the hand of an angry god. Buildings exploded. Concrete structures crumbled. Wooden homes disintegrated into splinters. The pressure wave crushed internal organs, burst eardrums, pulverized bones. Thousands died instantly from the force alone. Steel-reinforced concrete buildings near the hypocenter were reduced to hollow shells, their interiors gutted, their windows blown out. Only the strongest structures remained standing, and even these were twisted, warped, transformed into skeletal ruins. In the immediate aftermath, survivors wandered through a landscape that no longer resembled Earth. The 7 rivers that had defined Hiroshima for centuries were now choked with bodies, thousands of them, floating face down in water that had turned black with ash and blood. People who had jumped into the rivers to escape, the flames had boiled alive. Others drowned in the crush of bodies. Those who survived the initial blast wandered in shock, their skin hanging in strips, their hair burned away, many of them naked because the thermal pulse had incinerated their clothing. They moved like ghosts through ruins that stretched to the horizon, calling out for family members who no longer existed. The dead were everywhere. Bodies lay in the streets, in collapsed buildings, floating in rivers, piled in parks where people had sought shelter. Many were burned beyond recognition. Others appeared strangely intact, killed by the blast pressure or radiation without visible wounds. Rescue efforts began almost immediately, but the scale of destruction overwhelmed all attempts at organization. Hospitals had been destroyed. Medical supplies were gone. Doctors and nurses had been killed. Those who survived worked with bare hands and primitive tools, unable to do more than provide comfort to the dying. In the days following the blast, a new horror emerged. People who had survived the initial explosion with only minor injuries began to develop strange symptoms. Their hair fell out. Their gums bled. Purple spots appeared on their skin. They vomited blood and suffered from diarrhea and fever. Radiation sickness, though no one in Hiroshima knew that term yet. The invisible rays released by the bomb had penetrated their bodies, destroying cells, damaging DNA, leaving them to die slowly over days and weeks. Some survivors, seeing these symptoms develop in themselves, took their own lives rather than endure the agony. The final death toll remains uncertain even today. The best estimates suggest that by the end of 1945, between 130,000 and 220,000 people had died from the immediate effects of the bombing and subsequent injuries and illnesses. Thousands more would die in the following years from cancers and other radiation-related diseases. An entire city had been effectively erased in 9 seconds. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because Hiroshima did not remain a wasteland. The city that died at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, began to show signs of life almost immediately. Within hours, survivors were digging through rubble, searching for loved ones. Within days, makeshift shelters appeared among the ruins. Within weeks, people began clearing debris and planning reconstruction. Against all logic, against all reasonable expectation, Hiroshima refused to stay dead. The rebuilding began before the ashes had cooled. It started with individual acts of survival and defiance. A woman clearing a space to sleep. A man salvaging bricks to build a temporary shelter. A group of survivors pooling resources to open a makeshift food distribution center. These small actions multiplied, spreading through the ruins like green shoots breaking through concrete. The Japanese word for this phenomenon is game-and endurance, perseverance, the ability to bear the unbearable with dignity. Hiroshima's survivors embodied this concept absolutely. By September 1945, 1 month after the bombing, trains were running again. The streetcar system had resumed limited service. Markets had reopened, though goods were scarce. Children were attending classes in damaged buildings with no windows or walls, sitting on rubble to write lessons on salvaged paper. It seemed impossible, yet it was happening. Life was returning to a place where life should have been impossible. The question of whether Hiroshima should be rebuilt at all had been debated in the immediate aftermath. Some officials suggested the city should remain as ruins, a permanent monument to the atomic age's terrible power. Others argued that the land itself was contaminated, that nothing could grow there for decades, that attempting to rebuild was futile. Both arguments proved wrong. Wildflowers began blooming in the ruins that autumn. Plants grew. Animals returned. The land was not dead, and the people refused to abandon their home. The reconstruction of Hiroshima became a symbol of something larger than the city itself. It represented Japan's determination to rise from defeat, to transform catastrophe into renewal. The city that had been Japan's 7th largest before the war, that had served as a military headquarters and industrial center, would be reborn as something entirely different, a city of peace dedicated to ensuring that no other city would ever suffer the same fate. In 1949, the Japanese parliament passed the Hiroshima Peace Memorial City Construction Law, designating Hiroshima as a peace memorial city and providing special funding for reconstruction. The city's new identity was formalized. Where military headquarters once stood, peace memorials would rise. Where weapons factories hummed, cultural centers would flourish. The transformation was not just physical, but spiritual, a conscious choice to turn the site of humanity's worst weapon into a beacon calling for its abolition. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park opened in 1954, built on the site that had once been the city's busiest commercial district. At its center stood the atomic bomb dome, the skeletal remains of the Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, one of the few buildings left partially standing near the hypocenter. Its twisted metal frame and hollow dome became the most recognizable symbol of the bombing, preserved exactly as the blast left it. Japanese architect Kenzo Tange designed the park and memorial museum to create spaces for reflection, mourning, and hope. But Hiroshima didn't just rebuild what was lost, it reimagined itself entirely. The narrow medieval street pattern was replaced with wide boulevards and green spaces. Modern buildings rose where wooden houses once crowded together. Parks and riverside promenades transformed the 7 channels that had once carried the dead. The city embraced modernity, not as a rejection of its past, but as an affirmation of its future. Every new building, every planted tree, every restored bridge was an act of defiance against the weapon that had tried to erase Hiroshima from existence. By the 1960s, Hiroshima's population had returned to pre-war levels. Industries relocated to the city, but now they produced automobiles and machinery rather than weapons. Mazda Motor Corporation established its headquarters in Hiroshima, employing thousands and driving economic growth. The port expanded. Universities opened. Cultural institutions flourished. The city became known for okonomiyaki, a savory pancake that originated as an affordable food during post-war scarcity and evolved into a beloved regional specialty. Life continued, enriched by memory, but not imprisoned by it. The survivors, known as hibakusha, became the living witnesses to atomic warfare's reality. Many spent decades advocating for nuclear disarmament, sharing their stories with visitors from around the world. They described the flash, the heat, the shadows on the walls, the fires, the rivers full of bodies. They showed their scars, both visible and invisible. They spoke at schools, at international conferences, at the United Nations. Their message was simple and unwavering. This must never happen again, to anyone, anywhere. Each year on August 6th, Hiroshima holds a memorial ceremony in Peace Memorial Park. At 8:15 a.m., the moment the bomb exploded, bells ring throughout the city and people observe a minute of silence. Paper lanterns are floated down the rivers at night, each one carrying a prayer for peace and remembrance of the dead. Thousands gather from around the world to participate. The ceremony is broadcast internationally, and every year the number of surviving hibakusha grows smaller as age and illness claim those who witnessed that terrible morning. Today, modern Hiroshima is a thriving city of 1.2 million people. Sleek office towers rise above tree-lined streets. The streetcar system, which remarkably survived the bombing and continued operating within 3 days of the attack, now runs modern trams alongside vintage models preserved from the 1940s. The 7 rivers that define the city's geography flow clean and clear, lined with walking paths and parks. Families picnic on riverbanks where bodies once floated. Children play in parks built over the ruins. Life has returned in full measure. The transformation is staggering when you compare photographs from August 1945 with images from today, where one shows absolute devastation, every building leveled, every tree stripped bare, nothing but rubble, and ash extending to the horizon. The other shows a vibrant modern city with green spaces, modern architecture, bustling commercial districts, and peaceful riverside paths. It seems impossible that these images depict the same place. The contrast represents one of the most dramatic urban transformations in human history. But Hiroshima has not forgotten, cannot forget. The Peace Memorial Museum remains one of the city's most visited sites, drawing more than 1 million visitors annually. Inside, artifacts tell the story that words struggle to convey. A watch stopped at 8:15, clothing with human shadows burned into the fabric, a tricycle pulled from the ruins with its young rider's remains, bottles melted by heat into strange sculptures. Photographs show the before and after a bustling city center suddenly transformed into atomic wasteland. Testimonies from survivors play on screens, their voices cracking with age and emotion as they describe what they witnessed. The city's commitment to peace extends beyond memory into action. Hiroshima's mayor sends letters to world leaders every time a nuclear weapon is tested, anywhere in the world, protesting the continued existence and development of atomic weapons. The city hosts international peace conferences. Students from Hiroshima schools participate in peace education programs that send them abroad to share their city's story. The message is consistent. Nuclear weapons represent an existential threat to humanity that must be eliminated. This commitment takes on added urgency as the last hibakusha age and pass away. By 2025, the youngest survivors of the bombing are in their 80s. Within a decade or two, there will be no living witnesses left. Hiroshima is racing against time to preserve testimony, to record voices, to ensure that future generations understand what happened not from history books alone, but from the words of those who were there. The city has digitized thousands of survivor testimonies, collected artifacts, and created educational programs designed to keep memory alive after the last witness is gone. The story of Hiroshima also includes remarkable acts of reconciliation. This capacity for forgiveness, this ability to transform trauma into a mission for peace, represents perhaps the most profound aspect of Hiroshima's transformation. Modern Hiroshima faces the same challenges as any contemporary city-aging infrastructure, environmental concerns, economic pressures. But these everyday problems unfold against the backdrop of extraordinary history. Every resident lives with the knowledge of what happened here. Every visitor to the Peace Memorial Park confronts the reality of what human beings can do to each other. And every person who sees the vibrant city that exists today must wrestle with the miracle and mystery of resilience, of how life reasserts itself, even in places of unimaginable death. The technologies that create modern cities, the AI systems that optimize traffic flow, the algorithms that manage power grids, the digital networks that connect millions of people, now exist alongside the memory of technology's most terrible application. Hiroshima uses artificial intelligence to preserve survivor testimonies, to create educational experiences, to manage its infrastructure. The same species that split atoms to create weapons has also built systems of digital intelligence, raised questions about where technology leads us and what values guide its use. Hiroshima stands as a reminder that technology is neither good nor evil. It is a tool whose moral character depends entirely on human choice. Walking through modern Hiroshima, you might pass the atomic bomb dome and see young couples taking wedding photos beside it, the twisted ruin serving as backdrop for celebrations of love and new life. You might see children playing in Peace Memorial Park, their laughter echoing across grass that grows over ground zero. You might ride the streetcar, sitting in the same model that survived the blast and returned to service within days, its continued operation a small victory over annihilation. These juxtapositions, death and life, memory and progress, horror and hope, define the city's essential character. The rivers that flow through Hiroshima no longer carry the dead. They carry kayakers and fishing boats, their banks lined with cherry trees that bloom each spring in explosions of pink and white that draw millions of visitors. The spring after the bombing, people wondered if the cherry trees would bloom. Many believed the radiation had killed them. But that April, against all expectation, the blossoms appeared, a signal that life would continue, that beauty would return, that the natural world possessed a resilience that matched the human spirit. Hiroshima's story is often told as a story of suffering, and rightfully so. The suffering was immense, beyond comprehension. But it is also a story of choice. The choice to rebuild rather than abandon. The choice to remember rather than forget. The choice to pursue peace rather than revenge. The choice to transform trauma into purpose. These were not inevitable outcomes. They required deliberate action, sustained effort, moral courage. Hiroshima chose to become a symbol of hope rather than simply a symbol of destruction. The city that died at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, has been reborn not once, but continuously, each generation rebuilding and reimagining what Hiroshima means. The physical reconstruction took decades. The emotional and spiritual reconstruction continues still. Every survivor who shared their story made a choice to relive their worst moment so that others might understand. Every official who committed resources to peace education rather than military development made a choice about priorities. Every citizen who works to preserve memory for future generations makes a choice about what matters. Today, when you stand in Peace Memorial Park and look toward the atomic bomb dome, then turn to see the modern city skyline rising behind it, you witness something remarkable, not just the physical transformation from ruins to metropolis, but the visible evidence of humanity's capacity for both destruction and creation, for both unleashing terrible power and building something meaningful from its aftermath. The same ingenuity that split atoms to create weapons has built cities of millions, connected the world through digital networks, and confronted the greatest challenges facing our species. Hiroshima reminds us that no wound is necessarily permanent, no destruction absolutely final, and that the choice between devastation and renewal often comes down to human will, the determination to build rather than destroy, to remember without being consumed by, revenge to transform suffering into purpose. The city that should have remained a wasteland for generations instead became a living argument for peace, proof that even the worst horrors humans inflict on each other need not be the final word. As the number of hibakusha dwindles and direct memory of August 6, 1945 fades into history, Hiroshima faces a new challenge, keeping alive the visceral understanding of what nuclear weapons do, not just as abstract concepts, but as reality that happened to real people in a real place. The city uses every tool available: museums, memorials, education programs, digital archives, international partnerships, to ensure that future generations understand. Because understanding is the foundation of commitment, and commitment is what stands between humanity and repeating history's worst mistakes. On August 6, 2045, Hiroshima will mark the 100th anniversary of the atomic bombing. By then, almost certainly, no survivors will remain to bear witness. The city will be further transformed by decades of technological advancement. But if Hiroshima maintains its commitment to memory and peace, if it continues to tell its story with honesty and power, then the lessons of that terrible morning will still echo across the world, a reminder of what we must never do again, and a testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit when it chooses hope over despair. The city that vanished in an atomic flash and rose again from its own ashes doesn't just ask us to remember the past. It challenges us to imagine a future where such weapons have no place, where technology serves human flourishing rather than human destruction, where the choice is always life, always building, always moving toward light rather than darkness. Because if Hiroshima can transform from ground zero into a city of peace and life, then perhaps humanity can find the wisdom to ensure no other city ever needs to make that same journey from death to life again.